This week, to go with Iggy Peck Architect, we are going to design our own city making buildings. We can use these examples as inspiration for our buildings and all the details we can add. And here is an example of what we will call a cityscape. Okay, we're going to start by making rectangles, general shapes, go all the way down to the bottom. The top is where you will kind of add your details. You can stair step it up, make a point, I did two curves, made two small rectangles at the top. Oh, made a little mistake, that's okay. Coming out and going down to the bottom. This is our front row of buildings in the cityscape, so these buildings will have the most detail, and that's why they will end up being the largest. So you're just making the general shapes. We're going to go back in a second and make details. Now I'm going to go back to my second layer, and this line is more of a continual line with different shapes, rectangles, squares, curves, stair steps, but it's more of a continual line. You have less details and less separated buildings. You can still add points to the buildings. So we're doing this drawing as like a pen and ink drawing, so I'm going to be teaching you different pen techniques as we work through this. Now we're going to start adding details. I always just pick a building and pick a spot. I like to start with windows, so I'm making like a semicircle kind of windows to go to that top. Lines make the windows, details on the top pieces, some antennas. The details of this drawing is what's going to make it look really nice. Now I'm coming to the bottom to make the door, and I start with an arch, and then that's another detail to make a little molding there, a semicircle, some more details. Then we'll do some little squares and a circle to make the rest of the door. Then I'm going to repeat that shape on either side to make some more windows. And you can always reference the beginning of this video where I gave you those example sheets to kind of get ideas from. That's kind of what I'm getting my ideas from. Some squares for some windows. Now I'm going to the background. These are smaller because they're further back, right? They have less details because they're further behind, but still some details. And I kind of just pop around my paper, adding details where I can. This is the top of the building in the front. I had made it a smaller building, now I want it taller, so I just added a line. Adding some details to those chimneys. And then I'm making a stone pattern right now. Again, that's on the example sheet at the beginning to kind of give it some fun details. Again, some more details on the chimney, just some horizontal lines. Now I'm starting on the doors at the bottom. I'm going to start with two tall rectangles, handles, a semicircle. Thinking about what my next design is going to be. Nice big rectangles for some windows. Adding another layer of rectangles, which kind of makes the molding on the outside and the lines for the inside of the windows. Details here are key. They provide a lot of life to your drawing, and so I'm just adding details. You can kind of see how I just pop around the paper, do some in the back, do some in the front. Remember, the ones in the front will always have more detail than the ones in the back. Okay, now you can see all the details that I've started to add. I've got shingles, I've got windows, I've got brick. Now I'm going in with the other side of my pen marker, and I'm kind of just making the lines thicker to distinguish the buildings just so that they don't look like they run together as much. If you don't want to do this step, you don't have to. If you don't have a thicker side of your marker, you can always use the marker a couple of times, but I'm just accentuating some lines in some places to create some difference between the layers of the building so that they don't look the same. Now I'm going to go in with a little bit of color into my pen and ink drawing just to give it some life. So I'm using some yellow in the windows. And then I'm going to go and use some orange for the windows. This is just some lights that we might see in the city. And then I'm going to use some different techniques for the actual building. So I use red and brown. And I'm using like cross-hatching lines. That's what the art term is. And I also use the thick side of my marker and the thin side of my marker. If you're using just a regular marker, you can use the tip of your marker and then you can lean it on its side and use the side. And cross-hatching goes vertically up and down and side to side. It kind of creates shadow and depth and adds some color without totally coloring it in and losing the pen and ink illustration that I really like in this drawing. So I, again, do that in different places around my paper. I don't do the whole buildings the same, just add a little bit of color where I feel like it needs it. And I do it on the roofs and on the buildings, thick and thin, and I mix them. There's no right or wrong way to do this. You're just adding some detail to enhance the illustration. Now we're going to work on this background, and there's all kinds of different ways. I decided to do like a sunburst or like a firework background, so I'm just using the same markers and I'm using a circular motion and filling in layers of space that way to fill in the background. The background I'm going to fill in all the way, whereas the buildings I did not. That way the buildings stand out and they pop, but you still have a nice backdrop for your city. So I'm going to go in layers around. I did yellow and orange for the sun, and now I'm doing different shades of blue for the sky. So you could look at it as fireworks, or you could just look at it as a specially designed sky. But I'm just using a back and forth motion to kind of create these starbursts. Perfect. Okay, now I'm going to do a simpler cityscape. This would be more of a K2, and we're going to use the same simple shapes as the beginning buildings, rectangles, different tops. I just make them a little bit bigger, and then again, we add the details the same, less details and simpler shapes, rectangles, arches, yep, semicircles. You can still add frames to them. You can still add up and down lines, rectangles, lines for your windows, circles for your doorknobs. So the process is the same. You can just make the buildings a little bit bigger and your shapes inside them a little bit simpler. I did switch to the other side of my pen to add some smaller details inside my larger shapes. So this is a process that works for any grade level, just to give the building some more dimension, a little bit more variety in the drawing. I also am doing like a shingle pattern here and then a brick pattern. So these are things that were on that example sheet at the beginning. So now you can see the completed K2 cityscape. And for the background for this one, I'm using crayon, and I did more of a sunset. I did a semicircle sun with a blue background. And so here are the two finished cityscapes. I hope you enjoyed making this, and be sure to post your pictures.